Number 7. Pontiac GTO. The Pontiac GTO sold 10,532 units in 1971. In 1969, it had sold 72,287. In 1968, it had sold 87,684. The car that had created the American muscle car segment, that had generated the magazine covers and the advertising copy, and the specific automotive desire that the 1960s made commercially possible, was now selling fewer copies than the Maverick sold in a slow month. The insurance companies had done what the federal emissions standards had not yet finished. They had made high-performance ownership prohibitive for the buyer who had previously defined the market. A 19-year-old with a 1971 GTO and a 400 cubic inch V8 was paying insurance premiums that, in several states, exceeded the monthly car payment. The calculation that had made the muscle car the aspirational purchase of a generation, performance accessible to a young buyer with a factory wage, had been inverted. The GTO is at number 7 because 10,532 units is not a sales figure, it is a eulogy. The car that defined an era sold fewer copies in 1971 than in any year since 1964, and the era it had defined did not survive the decade. Number 6. Chevrolet Vega. Motor Trend awarded the 1971 Chevrolet Vega its Car of the Year. The aluminum cylinder block was already failing. General Motors had developed the Vega in approximately 30 months, a timeline that standard automotive development required at least twice as long to complete with full engineering validation. The aluminum block paired with a cast iron head produced differential thermal expansion that the head gaskets could not indefinitely accommodate. By 1972, owners were discovering this. In 1971, none of it was public. The Vega was the domestic compact that Motor Trend had endorsed, that Chevrolet dealers had in stock, and that buyers who needed a small car could purchase at a price Japanese imports could not undercut at a domestic dealership. It was available. It was new. It was, by every external measure in 1971, Detroit's answer to the compact question. The Vega is at number 6 because in 1971, before the service records accumulated, it was exactly the car American buyers needed it to be, and because the engineering shortcut that would define its legacy was still assembling itself inside those aluminum cylinders while the Motor Trend Award was being printed. Number 5. Ford Pinto. The Ford Pinto entered its first full model year in 1971 as the subcompact Lee Iacocca had authorized in 25 months, a development timeline nearly identical to the Vega's, at a weight limit of 2,000 pounds and a price limit of $2,000. American buyers responded in numbers that placed the Pinto among the year's best-selling domestic compacts. The internal document that would later define its legal history had been prepared. It was in Ford's files. In 1971, it was not in the newspapers. The buyer who chose a Pinto in 1971 was not purchasing a lawsuit. They were purchasing the most affordable domestic small car at the most accessible American dealer in the context of a fuel economy conversation that the country had not yet been forced to have at full volume, and in a year when the internal calculations that would later define the car's legal history were still confined to Ford's filing cabinets. Number 4. Plymouth Duster. The Plymouth Duster sold 196,271 units in 1971. It had launched the previous year as the performance-accessible A-body coupe with the Valiant's proven platform beneath a fastback roofline that communicated youth without requiring the muscle car insurance premium. Its 340 cubic inch V8 gave buyers the performance argument the GTO could no longer make affordable. Its base slant 6 gave buyers the Chrysler reliability record the Vega and Pinto had not yet accumulated. It occupied the precise position 1971 required, small enough to answer the compact conversation, powerful enough for the buyer who still wanted an option, and priced where the insurance company's calculations could not punish it the way they had punished the GTO. The buyer who drove a Duster home in 1971 had made the correct calculation for the year.
Not the GTO's calculation, which the insurance market had made impossible, and not the Vegas, which the engineering had not yet validated. The Duster is at number 4 because 196,271 units confirmed that Plymouth had identified exactly what the 1971 compact buyer needed, and because the platform it rode on had been proving itself correct since 1963. Number 3. Ford Maverick. Every Ford advertisement for the Maverick in 1971 contained the same number, $1,995. Ford printed it on dealer signs, newspaper ads, and every piece of showroom literature the company produced because the number was the argument, and the argument needed no support. The Maverick had launched in 1970 as the subcompact priced below import competition at the domestic dealer, and its 1971 sales confirmed the calculation. American buyers who needed transportation at the lowest available price from the most accessible American dealer chose it in numbers that placed it among the year's top domestic compacts. Its inline-six returned fuel economy that the Impala's V8 could not approach. Its unibody construction kept the weight below what the compact market required and the price within the number Ford had committed to in every advertisement it ran that year. Number 2. Dodge Dart. 8 years. That is how long the Dodge Dart's Slant 6 had been accumulating its reputation before 1971 arrived with 2 new domestic compacts and the question of which small car America should trust. The answer had been available at Dodge dealers since 1963, and nothing Chevrolet or Ford introduced in 1971 changed it. The Slant 6 ran on regular fuel. It carried no insurance surcharge. It required no specialized maintenance. It started on cold mornings in states where the Vega's aluminum block was already showing what differential thermal expansion could do to a head gasket. The mechanic who serviced a Dart told the next customer. The buyer who had driven one to 150,000 miles described the maintenance cost in terms that made the Vega's Motor Trend Award irrelevant. While Detroit was introducing 2 new answers to the compact question in 1971, one with an aluminum block and one with a fuel system that was being documented in an internal file, the correct answer was already 8 years old and still being driven to work by the people who had chosen it in 1963.
Number 1. Chevrolet Impala. In 1971, the Chevrolet Impala was still the most purchased passenger car in the United States. Not the Vega, not the Maverick, not the Pinto. The full-size B-body Chevrolet with the 350 or 400 cubic inch V8, the 6-passenger bench seat, and the turbo-hydromatic that had been doing its job since 1967 was what Americans chose in larger numbers than everything else on the road. The compact conversation was real. The imports were growing. Detroit was responding with 2 new small cars simultaneously, and the Impala was still outselling all of them. It would not last. The oil crisis was 2 years away. The downsizing that would transform the full-size American car was 7 years away. The 1971 Impala was the last version of itself that operated without the weight of everything coming, before the fuel crisis made the V8's operating cost a daily conversation, before the compact market fully matured. The Impala is at number 1 because in 1971, the year everything about American car culture was changing, more Americans chose the full-size Chevrolet than any other car on the road. They were right for that year. They would not be right for much longer.